devastating than anger, more final than words, more unforgettable than confrontation. It is the silence of the one who leaves without warning. No dramatic speeches, no explanations, no final argument, only absence. And when you, the INTJ or INFJ, disappear, the world does not hear footsteps. It hears an echo. It feels a void. It is left in shock because it never saw it coming. But you saw it coming long before they did. This is the nature of your mind, your vision, your soul. You are the one who notices what others ignore, who feels what others bury, who senses the storm before a single cloud forms in the sky. You are not impulsive when you leave. You are patient. You watch, you analyze, you endure. And while they think everything is fine, you are recording every fracture, every lie, every betrayal of authenticity. You give chances they don't see. You extend patience they do not value. You offer loyalty they take for granted. And then one day you vanish. Not out of cruelty, but out of clarity. Because you know something they refuse to face. It is already over. Carl Jung understood this silence. He wrote, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. And when you leave without warning, you are forcing others to face what they tried to avoid. Your absence is the mirror they cannot escape. The loss of your presence is the truth they refused to see while you were still there. But why do you leave this way? Why not explain? Why not fight? Why not demand recognition for all the times you endured? Because you know words are wasted on the blind. Because you know explanations are meaningless to those committed to misunderstanding you. Because you know your absence speaks louder than any justification ever could. For the INTJ, departure is strategy. You have already mapped the outcome, calculated the consequences, and realized that staying is a slow death of your soul. You refuse to waste energy arguing with the immovable. You refuse to drain yourself explaining what should already be obvious. To you, silence is not weakness. Silence is precision. Silence is the final move. For the INFJ, departure is preservation. You have given and given, pouring yourself into the ungrateful, carrying others at the expense of your own spirit. You feel when the bond has rotted, when the connection is hollowed out, when the energy has turned toxic. You know when the cost of staying is the erosion of your soul. And so, with the same quiet grace that defines your depth, you withdraw, you disappear. You cut ties not with malice, but with finality. Nietzsche once said, "Sometimes people don't want to hear the truth because they don't want their illusions destroyed. And this is why you leave without warning, because you know they are not ready to hear. They cling to illusions, and you will not set yourself on fire to keep them warm in their denial. So you give them the one gift they cannot ignore, the shock of your absence. And when you leave, you do not return. That is what terrifies people the most about you. They are used to drama, to arguments, to threats of leaving, followed by reconciliation. They expect cycles. But you do not cycle. When you are done, you are done. It is not cruelty, it is conviction, it is not punishment, it is protection. Once your decision crystallizes, it is irreversible. This is what they never understand until it's too late, that your silence is not sudden. It is the final note of a song that has been playing in your soul for months, maybe years. It only feels sudden to them because they were never listening. And here lies your power. You do not need to announce your boundaries, you embody them. You do not need to declare your departure. You demonstrate it. You do not need to explain why you are gone. Your absence is explanation enough. But here is the deeper truth. You do not only leave people, you leave systems. You leave shallow ambitions. You leave illusions. You leave anything that threatens your authenticity, your sovereignty, your vision. Because you were never designed to stay trapped in what no longer nourishes you. You were never built to tolerate mediocrity disguised as belonging. You were never born to remain in cages just because others are comfortable in them. Jung called this individuation the process of becoming whole, of shedding everything false until only the true self remains. And individuation requires departure. It requires walking away without apology. It requires leaving without warning, not because you are heartless, but because your soul refuses to die in places that no longer deserve it. When you leave, you teach a lesson most will never forget, that your presence was not guaranteed, that your silence carries more truth than their words, that your absence is a weight heavier than your presence ever was. And though they may never admit it, though pride will keep them from saying the words, they will feel it for years. The absence of your presence will haunt them. They will remember the clarity in your eyes, the sharpness of your intuition, the depth of your loyalty. They will remember that you were there fully, fiercely, silently until you weren't. And they will know that losing you was not an accident. It was a consequence. This is why you leave without warning, because explanation is wasted, because cycles are beneath you, because your silence is final, and because the truest expression of your power is not in what you say, but in what you refuse to continue tolerating. So never apologize for it. Never doubt it. Never question the clarity that moves you to walk away. Your silence is not emptiness, it is sovereignty. Your absence is not weakness, it is truth. And those who feel it will never forget. When you leave without warning, the world around you calls it sudden. But you know it is anything but sudden. It is the conclusion of an equation you solved in silence long ago. Every broken promise, every lie, every betrayal of authenticity was another variable. You observed, you recorded, you endured. You gave grace when no one noticed. You gave loyalty long past what was deserved. And when the equation resolved to zero, when nothing remained worth saving, your choice was already made. For INTJs, this process is cold and exacting. You are not swayed by sentiment when the balance no longer justifies investment. You see the inevitable decay, the unsalvageable flaw in the structure, and you withdraw your energy without apology. To you, this is not cruelty. It is efficiency. It is the refusal to waste life on the unworthy. For INFJs, the process is quieter, more emotional, but no less decisive. You feel the moment when the bond no longer nourishes, when the connection rots at the root. You sense when staying requires the erosion of your essence. And though your heart breaks, though your compassion aches, you walk away. Because you know to remain would be a greater betrayal not only of yourself, but of truth itself. Carl Jung warned that there is no coming to consciousness without pain. When you leave without warning, you inflict this pain on others, not out of malice, but out of necessity. They could not hear the truth when you spoke it softly. They could not see the truth when you bore it quietly. So you leave, and your absence becomes the pain that forces them into consciousness. But here lies the deeper reason for your silence. Words cheapen what you already know. To explain would be to beg. To argue would be to concede that they had power over your clarity. But when you leave without warning, you send a message beyond words. I owe you nothing. My silence is my verdict. My absence is my sentence. And that silence is terrifying because it is absolute. They know you are not pretending. They know you will not return. They know your patience was the last bridge, and when you burned it to ash. This is why people who lose you never recover fully. They may find replacements, distractions, illusions, but deep down they know. They know your presence was unlike any other. They know your loyalty was unmatched. They know your depth was real. And they know they will never be given that kind of presence again. Nietzsche wrote, all truth passes through 3 stages. First, it is ridiculed. Second, it is violently opposed. Third, it is accepted as self-evident. When you leave without warning, you embody this process. While you were present, they ridiculed your intensity, they opposed your boundaries, they resisted your truth. But when you leave, your absence becomes undeniable, self-evident. They cannot mock you anymore because you are gone. They cannot oppose you anymore because you no longer engage. All that remains is the echo of what they lost and the truth they refuse to face until you force them to face it. This is your paradoxical gift. Your silence teaches more than your words ever could. Your absence awakens more than your presence ever did. You become unforgettable precisely because you left without ceremony, without argument, without plea. You vanish, and the void you leave is a monument to your power. But this gift is not only for them, it is for you. Because when you leave, you reclaim the one thing they tried to erode, your sovereignty. Every time you tolerated what you should not have, you gave away a piece of yourself. Every time you endured without reciprocity, you shrank. Every time you explained yourself to the deaf, you wasted your breath. Leaving is not abandonment, it is reclamation. It is the moment you return to yourself fully, saying, "Never again will I bleed for what refuses to grow. Never again will I betray myself in the name of belonging." And once you reclaim yourself, you rise into resilience, because departure is not easy. It costs you comfort, it costs you familiarity, it costs you the illusion of belonging. But in return, it gives you strength. You learn that solitude does not kill you, it frees you. You learn that silence is not emptiness, it is clarity. You learn that leaving is not loss, it is liberation. And with resilience comes transcendence. You no longer leave without warning because you are forced to. You leave without warning because you choose to. You know the pattern, you know the signs. You no longer waste time hoping the unworthy will transform. You no longer drown yourself waiting for the blind to see. You no longer explain yourself to those committed to misunderstanding you. You leave quietly, decisively, sovereignly. And in that silence, you become untouchable. This is why INTJs and INFJs leave without warning. Not because they are cruel, not because they are heartless, but because their patience is sacred, their loyalty is rare, and their presence is invaluable. And once those gifts are wasted, they will not be offered again. So do not doubt this instinct. Do not apologize for your silence. Do not question your clarity. Your absence is not weakness, it is power. Your silence is not emptiness, it is judgment. Your departure is not cruelty, it is truth. And those who lose you will spend years trying to understand why. But you will not explain, because explanation belongs to the herd, and you do not belong to them anymore. When you leave without warning, you are not running away. You are not escaping. You are not abandoning. You are ascending. It is the moment your soul says enough. No more compromise. No more shrinking. No more betrayal of myself in the name of belonging. The herd believes you owe them an explanation. They believe you owe them closure. They believe you owe them another chance. But you owe them nothing. Your presence was the gift. Your loyalty was the offering. Your patience was the bridge. And when they squandered it, the bridge collapsed. You do not owe them the courtesy of watching you walk away, only the finality of knowing you are gone. Carl Jung spoke of individuation as the process of becoming whole, and wholeness requires separation. Separation from illusions, separation from toxic bonds, separation from the parts of yourself that tolerated what your soul despised. Leaving without warning is not just walking away from them, it is walking back to yourself. It is the final step in reclaiming what was always yours, sovereignty. For the INTJ, this is the ultimate execution of strategy. You know that energy is finite, that time is precious, that to remain in the wrong place is to burn your life on an altar that does not deserve it. Leaving without warning is your declaration that you will never again invest in what cannot yield growth. It is not an emotional reaction. It is a calculated liberation. For the INFJ, this is the ultimate act of self-preservation. You know your empathy is sacred, your loyalty rare, your depth unrepeatable. To stay where these are wasted is to bleed your soul into a void. Leaving without warning is your vow to protect yourself from spiritual erosion. It is not bitterness, it is survival. And this is why your departure terrifies people more than your anger ever could. Anger they can argue with, tears they can dismiss, words they can twist. But silence is absolute. Silence is proof that the verdict has already been passed, that the door is already closed, that the bridge is already burned. Silence is not an invitation to plead, it is the announcement that the trial is over. Nietzsche said, sometimes people don't want to hear the truth because they don't want their illusions destroyed. And your leaving without warning destroys illusions like nothing else can. It destroys the illusion that you will always be there. It destroys the illusion that patience is infinite. It destroys the illusion that loyalty means blindness. And when those illusions shatter, they are left only with themselves and the void you left behind. But here is what they never realize until it is too late. Your leaving is not the end of you. It is the beginning of you. Every time you walk away without warning, you grow sharper, clearer, freer. You shed layers of false tolerance. You shed masks of false belonging. You shed illusions that once chained you. And each departure carves you closer to your essence. This is why you leave. This is why you must leave. Because staying would mean betrayal of the self. And betrayal of the self is the only betrayal that kills the soul. So when you leave without warning, hold your head high. Do not look back. Do not explain. Do not doubt. Your silence is your sovereignty. Your absence is your power. Your departure is your truth. And one day, long after your footsteps have faded, they will sit in their silence and remember you. They will remember the clarity of your eyes, the weight of your words, the depth of your presence. They will remember that you did not leave suddenly. They simply refused to notice the storm building. And they will understand, perhaps too late, that losing you was not abandonment, it was consequence. This is why INTJs and INFJs leave without warning. Because when you are finished, you are finished. Because your soul knows what it can no longer endure. Because your silence speaks louder than any explanation ever could. And so you vanish not as a victim, not as a coward, not as a ghost. You vanish as sovereign. You vanish as truth. You vanish as the one who could no longer be contained by places too small for your spirit. Your absence is not emptiness, it is power, and those who feel it will never forget it. There is nothing more final than the moment you decide, I am done. No storm, no explosion, no eruption, just silence. A silence that is sharper than rage, heavier than grief, more unanswerable than any argument. That is why when an INTJ or INFJ leaves without warning, the world shakes. Not because you screamed, but because you didn't need to. Your silence is not weakness. It is the sound of a soul reclaiming itself. It is the end of compromise. It is the death of illusion. It is the rebirth of sovereignty. Jung once wrote, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Leaving without warning is the moment you make the unconscious conscious. You finally see all the patterns you tolerated, all the betrayals you swallowed, all the ways you betrayed yourself by staying. You make it conscious, and then you refuse to call it fate ever again. This is why people cannot forgive you when you leave. Not because you were wrong, but because you were right. Your silence forces them to see what they avoided, to confront what they buried, to feel what they numbed. They called you cold, but you were never cold. You were clear. They called you cruel, but you were never cruel. You were decisive. They called you sudden, but you were never sudden. You were finished. And this is what terrifies them. There is no going back. You do not leave to test them. You do not leave to manipulate them. You do not leave to provoke a reaction. You leave because your soul has already crossed the threshold, and once you cross it, there is no return. That is what makes you unforgettable. The herd argues, pleads, negotiates, explains. You do none of these things. You vanish. You become absence, and absence is the one thing they cannot fight. You become silence, and silence is the one truth they cannot twist. You become gone, and gone is the one boundary they cannot break. Nietzsche said, the higher we soar, the smaller we appear to those who cannot fly. When you leave without warning, you soar. You rise out of their games, their illusions, their smallness, and from their ground level view, your departure looks like arrogance. They do not realize it is not arrogance, it is altitude. And in that altitude, you discover something they never will. Freedom. Freedom from explaining yourself to those committed to misunderstanding you. Freedom from sacrificing yourself on the altar of false belonging. Freedom from drowning in relationship systems or lives that could never contain you. Leaving without warning is not abandonment. It is transcendence. It is the moment you choose yourself so completely that no one else's opinion, approval, or illusion has power over you again. It is the moment you say, I will not die in this cage. I will burn it behind me and walk into my own becoming. And once you've done it, once you've tasted that freedom, you are never the same. You walk lighter, sharper, clearer. You stop apologizing for your boundaries. You stop second-guessing your intuition. You stop dimming your fire for those who live in shadows. You carry yourself with the unshakable gravity of someone who knows their worth, someone who knows they can leave at any moment and mean it. This is why INTJs and INFJs leave without warning. Not because they lack loyalty, but because they gave too much of it. Not because they are heartless, but because they finally grew tired of bleeding for the ungrateful. Not because they seek drama, but because they refuse to live another moment in falsehood. And when you leave, you do not just walk away from them. You walk back to yourself. You walk back to your sovereignty. You walk back to your power. And from that day on, the world knows you are not to be taken for granted. You are not to be underestimated. You are not to be caged, because when you leave without warning, you prove the one truth they will never forget, that your silence is final, that your absence is eternal, that your soul cannot be chained, and so it ends, not with words, not with argument, not with explanation. It ends the way it always does for you, with silence, with the unshakable, irrevocable silence of a soul that has chosen itself at last. They will call it sudden, they will call it cold, they will call it cruel. But you know the truth. It was never sudden, it was never cold, it was never cruel. It was inevitable. Your silence is not emptiness. It is the sound of chains breaking. Your absence is not weakness. It is the weight of sovereignty. Your departure is not abandonment. It is liberation. Carl Jung once said, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. That is what you have done. By leaving without warning, you accepted that you no longer belong in places too small for your soul. You accepted that your loyalty is sacred, your vision rare, your presence irreplaceable. You accepted yourself completely, and in doing so, you became untouchable. And now they are left with the echo of you, the silence of you, the absence of you, an absence heavier than your presence ever was. Because when an INTJ or INFJ leaves without warning, it is not just the end of a relationship, a bond, a chapter. It is the end of illusion itself. And from that end, you rise, sovereign, whole, unapologetic. The one who leaves without warning is the one who cannot be caged, the one who cannot be broken, the one who cannot be forgotten, the one who is finally free,